We are live. Welcome everyone to the throne room for our Healing Challenges Mental Health Edition. I am excited to be in the throne room this Wednesday afternoon with my friends, my brothers, and my sister to be able to talk about a much needed conversation, a much essential conversation regarding mental health and the minority, specifically the Black community. My name is Monica Jackson. I am the founder of Royalty Mission Network. Joining me this afternoon is Jackie Oliver of For Your Minds Inc., as well as brother Ned White from Pure Care Ministries, along with my brother Jerome Kidd, BPCRSP, all of the above, meaning he got all the credentials to be able to be in this conversation today. He is joining us, and I am just really happy and excited to have all of you with me. How are y'all doing today?
Doing great.
Doing
Good.
good.
Good. So I'm gonna give y'all a quick second if there was anything that y'all wanted to share. So I believe it should be live. It should have popped up on our screen. So give you a few seconds to share it with your people so everyone can get on. Okay, I believe it's good.
Yes.
Talk to us, Jackie. How you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. I'm excited about this topic. It's something that we've been intentional about, and it's part of the healing journey. You got to address it head on.
Amen.
Absolutely
Um,
agree.
that's right. What I wanted to do this afternoon is around this topic, trauma. Some of the things that I had kind of looked up and looked at were some of the things that some of the scientists were saying around this topic. And so what I found was that crisis counselors have been saying that the mental health crisis has been impacting the Black community harder now than any other community. So when it comes to our mental health, oftentimes what they're seeing is that each of us have our own unique perspectives. I'll say to that all of us, no matter what skin color and skin tone we are, we have a unique perspective about our mental health. And so this afternoon, what I want to do is what I say is key for this conversation, to be able to help our communities, to be able to help an individual be able to get through this whole mental health and trauma piece, and be able to really see life as something to live for. What I want to do today is be able to come into the throne room, take the cover off, and begin the conversation by first and foremost listening. So today we're going to take a stance to come together and listen. So I'm going to say this: we don't know all of the answers and we don't have all of the information. We're not experts in any particular field, although some might say we are. But what we are doing is we are going to be listening to each other. We're going to be listening and wanting to hear from all of you who are joining us online. So please feel free to ask a question, make a statement, drop it down below. We want to hear from you. Most importantly, we want to acknowledge you. And so this afternoon, we ready? Everybody ready to take the cover off,
Absolutely.
right? So
Pull 'em
as
back.
we begin the conversation of trauma in this minority community, one of the things that I've noticed is that people don't actually begin to do things until they see a celebrity do it, right? Until a celebrity or somebody of higher status gets on and makes a statement about something is when everybody else wants to join the bandwagon and get on. And since that is the case, we invited a celebrity to this conversation. And so today I want to invite the celebrity, Miss Taji P. Henson herself, as she gave a wonderful interview and insight into mental health and how it is impacting the Black community during her interview at the Black Caucus.
African American community don't deal with mental health issues. We don't even talk about it. We've been taught to pray our problems away. We've been demonized for coming out saying we had issues, and we had trust issues. Um, I need the person sitting opposite for me when I go seek help for my mental to be culturally competent. And if you're not culturally competent, how can I trust you with my deepest secrets and with my vulnerability? So this foundation was
What she said is, we need trust. How can I do that if I can't trust you with my deepest secrets and I can't be vulnerable? And so today we are becoming curious. We're being open minded. We're most definitely going to be vulnerable. We're being empathetic to one another while respecting the process. Everyone comes to the situation and their own places with their own needs. And today we're going to have this conversation. I'm going to start this off by saying my first question to you guys is, how did you feel about what Taraji said? What really, did anything from what she said resonate with you with regards to how the Black community really deals with trauma?
I want to start off by saying I totally agree. When I myself looked for a therapist, there were certain things that I looked for. One of it was somebody that understands my culture, someone that looks like me. And we had this conversation. Jerome can chime in. Culturally competent is not just a Black person, but I had to have line up with somebody that lined up with my spiritual beliefs, because I didn't want somebody telling me to do something that contradict what I believe. Um, and then I wanted to make sure that it was somebody that I can trust. Because even though you're paying them, sometimes uh, you don't connect, and you can't be honest and open and truthful with somebody you have no trust. And I know it's a different type of relationship, but the trust factor is key, because that's when you really disclose and you're really open about what's happening, and you can't get down to the bottom if you're not really honest about what's going on.
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. Like everybody on the panel, I mean, we've all had our moments. For me, even recently, having to find and seek counseling for my son, my youngest son, finding someone that I could trust, someone who I was comfortable with, and ultimately he was comfortable with, was a challenge. It was a huge challenge. And so being able to find that individual who has a cultural awareness of who we are, who looks like I look, and somebody who my son could have related to, was very, very important to us. And I mean, and it's not easy to do. And, you know, we've had enough opportunities where we've touched with someone or connected, and then that trust is broken, and it sets us way back when we're trying to get the help that we need.
You bring up two important terms: cultural competency on the part of the professional. We need to talk to someone when we're dealing with trauma, but not just anyone.
Correct.
So that's the point that I think we're all making. The other part that Brother Ned just mentioned is cultural awareness. What Taraji was doing in her presentation is kind of coming off the cuff with some things about ourselves, about our own community, our own beliefs that not all of us really acknowledge, I think. We have at this point not talked about mental health to the point that we really don't know how we look at mental health in the Black community, because we really have been silent on the issue. So the whole issue that she mentioned about our faith community hoping that we might be able to pray ourselves through recovery is a very, very important point culturally, because she is so right about that. That there are certain denominations that do not want you to take the medication. There are certain denominations that don't think that you should be in psychotherapy because they're bending your mind. You know, so we need to be aware of those biases ourselves before we can go out and seek culturally competent support.
Well said.
One of the things that, and the reasons why, not only did I share that because it was a celebrity and everybody normally joins the bandwagon, but it was because at that moment in time, she expressed a feeling, a fear, a position that really seemed to make this thing real, right? It brought to the reality, my own reality, that, you know what, we aren't addressing this thing right, and we aren't addressing this thing in a correct way. And so I'm glad that we are taking the opportunity to listen, because all she wanted people to do was listen. And so today, as we do our listening session, and as we look at people who join in and any of the comments that they want to share, let's begin talking about what trauma in the Black community looks like. How does it show up, and what are some of the various ways? Because oftentimes, what I've noticed is that some of the things in which we actually endure and encounter, we overlook them, and we don't appropriately deal with them because we don't even recognize that it has been a trauma incident, right? And so I want to talk about, what does that look like in the minority community?
The reason for Taraji, the Henson Foundation, was because she grew up in a household where there was trauma. She
Right.
did that in honor of her father, who came back from the military, from active duty, with PTSD. So she understood and understands the impact on the family of someone who comes back having seen things that we don't want to admit that we saw, or that we shouldn't have seen. So you come back and you deal with your family, but you see them through a completely different lens going forward. So she was personally involved when she made that presentation to the caucus. And I think we all can relate. And I'm glad you opened it up this way. We all know either someone that we consider to have been shell-shocked, because that's what we used to call it. And we have all these little nicknames in our community for things that really are serious conditions, but we almost trivialize them with the names that we give them. Down in the dumps, as opposed to depressed. Oh, they're just down in the dumps.
Also, Jerome, to that point, in our community, we've normalized trauma.
Yes.
We've made some things that are traumatic normal, so we desensitize ourselves.
Yes.
And I remember growing up, at about third or fourth grade, seeing a friend get shot, and it was normal in my community to see people get shot, but that's not normal. That's not the average person. Don't walk around in life seeing people get killed. But in my community, growing up in the projects in Newark, I grew up in Georgia King Village in Newark, 30-something years. That was normal to see, hear people getting shot. I remember my first incident, a car running up on the curb with me. I was in like third, fourth grade, being one of my friends who are still friends. We talk about it every time we get together and laugh now, but as a kid, that was traumatizing. A car jumping the curb and getting ready to stick up kids. But that's not normal. But that it's traumatizing. But because we're, the conditions of the community, we were so used to stuff like that happen, it became the norm, but it's not normal. So that's why in our community, and even in our homes, things that happened in our homes, there was a saying, what happens in this house stays in this house. Don't air your dirty laundry in public. But at the same time, how many of us were exposed to things that, we had said something, we could have been able to find help and end the trauma, but, because we were raised that way, you don't share, what happens in this house. We've endured a lot of things as children growing up in our homes. That's not normal.
So instead, we suffer in silence.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And so many families in our communities do that. I mean, I think to your point, Jackie, we've normalized trauma in our communities to the point where we're almost numb to it. I mean, everything that goes on. I mean, I think I shared earlier on that, I'm getting a phone call on a regular basis about a young man who I've known or I've watched grow up get killed. There's a funeral even on this coming Friday of a young man who I've known. I knew his dad, and now here he is, we're burying his son. And so it almost becomes the norm. It's like, okay, let me put this on my schedule of things to do because I know I got a funeral on Friday. Not even having an opportunity to grieve it properly because it's such a normal part of the day that you don't even take into consideration that this is impacting you in a way that you normally wouldn't, that normal folks wouldn't deal with it that way. Like, and I hate to use the word normal because what is that? But
What is it?
Right.
Yes.
but to be able to really have to deal with the grief, the trauma, and the devastation that impacts the community, you don't even handle it the way that folks would expect, or even how you would really anticipate to do it if you didn't have to deal with it on a regular basis.
Right.
I'm glad you
And
brought up that.
to that effect, Ned, you had me thinking when we grew up, there were more children burying their parents.
Correct.
Now it's parents burying their children.
Absolutely.
And that has become the norm in our community, but it's not how it should be.
Right. Absolutely.
People usually die of old age, but now life is being taken out violently. So, and then these young people have children that are growing up without parents, mothers without children. And it's in our community, it's become a big business. You put balloons out, put flowers out, buy T-shirts, and that's not normal. That's traumatizing because at the end of the day, there's a loss that's suffered, and it desensitizes us to what's happening. And first thing everybody says, "Oh, we gonna get T-shirts." No, somebody just violently died.
Right. Right.
Or the other part, which really disturbs me as well, is how the minute that these traumatic moments happen in our communities, there is this population of vultures who tend to try to capitalize off of our moments of.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think on the to break it down even just a little bit more when we talk about the community trauma and the violence, I think that there's parts of it that we don't even acknowledge as far as we do. That we glean over it. It's the historical trauma, right? And then it's the trauma that we experience right now with police brutality. It's the things that we see as far as, Mr. Watson across the street, he did something to little Nene them, but don't nobody say nothing. It hasn't been really addressed that way because Mr. Watson, he do XYZ for the community, right? Or he pay mama bills, and so we can't talk about it. And I think that really does us a disadvantage to really glean over things. And as you all have stated, people really try to maximize off of that. But even in those moments where people are maximizing on those opportunities, they too are experiencing a level of trauma and distress that they don't even recognize. And so as we kind of talk about things from that perspective, I want to actually put my hand into another part of this pot as far as us talking about how social media really impacts and what the trauma is that is experienced. If you guys feel that any happens from our interactions with social media. But I wanted to get a viewpoint and glean in on a conversation with regards to how does social media and other media platforms influence our mental health? And do you even believe that it causes a type of trauma?
Yes, it does. I'm gonna hit this one because when COVID hit, my main objective was to make sure that I stayed emotionally safe. So because every 2 seconds on the news, it was about people dying, the death count going up, I cut the TV off because that can emotionally, especially over a prolonged period of time, that could drive you to drink and do other things. And people didn't understand that TV's being on, hearing about death. That's why I don't watch the first 10 minutes of the news because it's all about death, violence. And it's like media thrives on that. Whoever get the story out first get the best ratings. But at the same time, are they sensitive to how this is making people feel? What is bringing up, what is triggering in some people, especially when you look at the situation with the George Floyds and Breonna Taylor, all of that was new to some people, but that's our everyday life that just was brought to the forefront. At the same time, we're feeling for our own unique situations in our own community. And now we got this national thing happening, which, compacted things. And people were just in an uproar like, hey, I'm tired. And after a while, you get tired of being tired of the same thing happening and nothing changing. So you do what you know to do. And that's, the media plays a big part in it. Social media, you see it coming off. If you ever want to know what's happening in your local community, look at your group of friends and go on social media. If something happened hot, all of them got something on chiming in on it. And it's like, is that safe for our emotional well-being? No.
Yeah. I would agree to that because what I realize is that even sometimes me watching certain movies, it brought trauma to me. Like I was really traumatized by certain movies that I watched, right?
Yeah.
And I'll even go as far to say that I believe that social media and all these other media platforms really reveal the danger of freedom of speech. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, we need to have, but there is so much that happens in the atmosphere and inside of people because of people's words, and everybody doesn't have a religious background or any spiritual understanding, so they might not really understand when I say the power of life and death really does lie in our tongues, right?
Absolutely.
The things that we say, it does matter. That phrase, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, is a fallacy.
Words hurt.
That's
Words have
traumatic.
power.
Right. It's traumatic in itself. I remember my mama telling me something like, you got to fight smart. And it's like, you don't understand what I'm going through. I was going through traumatic experiences, moving from a school that was predominantly all white to a school that was predominantly all black, and me not being able to fit in. That was another form of trauma, right? People don't recognize that our children face these things, and they might be in good intentions, right? That traumatic experiences can happen through good intentions. But with that being said, what are we doing as caregivers, parents, communities, organizations? How are we establishing good and healthy habits, protocols, guidelines, structures to be able to help one really see the trauma that's there and then be able to live through it, right? I think that's
like
an
this.
important combo. I'm sorry, Jerome, what did you say?
I think it's programs like this because while I think I agree with everything you said about social media. It magnifies the trauma. But at the same time, were it not for social media, we wouldn't be in so many households right now.
Right.
So what it does is gives us an opportunity to begin to really step back. Yes, we need everything that you just mentioned, but first of all, we need to start talking about the elephant in the room. And you mentioned some of that. Not only are there elephants in every one of our rooms, some of us have a whole herd of elephants in our room.
Right.
So we need to begin to have those conversations that we don't want to talk about. And I think there was a posting on social media that I respect those people who talk about things that no one else will discuss.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things we just don't want to discuss, and we have to be real for ourselves and to ourselves and with ourselves before we can really expect a lot from anybody else.
Yeah.
We owe this to our community. A lot of our trauma is unique to our community, and we mentioned a lot of it.
Yes.
But we need to stop. For instance, here's something. I'm going to leave this alone, but here's something that bothers me a little bit.
Go ahead, brother.
Bro.
How quickly and easily we call something cray cray or crazy, and we do it in a dismissive tone. She's just a little cray cray. Well, see, unfortunately, that person may be suffering from a treatable disorder if we stop just blowing it off as being cray cray. Maybe there is an opportunity to get that psychological evaluation. You say that to somebody and they'll start running in the opposite direction. That you might need a psych eval. I need what? I mean, you may as well have said something about their children. So, and sometimes it is about the children. So we need to be very honest about the things we need to do for ourselves to be responsible. And you mentioned that whole freedom of speech thing. Freedom comes with responsibility.
Right.
With my freedom doesn't extend to everything that I want to do. My freedom kind of stops where yours begins. So we have to be responsible with our freedoms. And now we need to use that freedom that we have through mediums like this to be responsible to our community.
So question, do you believe that we could ever avoid traumatic experiences? Like, is it a way that we can stop trauma?
No, and we don't want to. We
Explain.
learned
Explain
so
that. I think
much
that's a
from
good
our
Absolutely.
pain. We learned
That's it.
so much from our pain. I mean, you said
Right.
take the covers off. Those 2 years I spent homeless taught
Yeah.
me who Jerome was.
Amen.
Yeah.
Okay. It was the most miserable time of my life. God and I had some very serious conversations about what was
Yes.
going on in my life.
Amen.
And I
Yes.
disapproved mightily with the situations that I had
Right.
to go through. However, the person that I am today, the more compassionate, more understanding, more open-minded individual that I am today, there was a point where I looked down on people. Now I'm at the point where I don't look down on anyone that I'm not trying to help up.
So,
You know,
Brother
so it
Jerome, how
changes
did
your perspective.
so how did you move? And that's real good. What you just said was great. How did you move from Jerome, who was homeless, to Jerome, who is on his way to wholeness? How did you move? What was present there that helped you do that? I think that that's important because a lot of people fall and find themselves in that dark space. But what helped you get out?
I'm gonna yes, radical acceptance. Is
What
this
does that
concept
mean?
called radical acceptance? At some point, you just have to accept that I will live the rest of my life with a disorder called bipolar. And just like if I had high blood pressure or diabetes, there might be some protocols that I need to follow in order to allow myself to have a normal life, which means at 7 o'clock in the morning, my alarm goes off and I take my medication. At 7 p.m. in the evening, my alarm goes off and I take my medication. Because for 3 times I tried not to take it and I ended up in a life-threatening situation and hospitalized all 3 times. Well, I kind of figured out what was going on eventually. You know, that psych meds don't work the way a lot of other meds work. We need to educate ourselves on that, and I had to be educated. So that was the first thing, is I had to be educated, and then that's the alphabet soup behind my name. You know, those are all certifications, and I was really learning about myself. But by learning about myself, I'm now in the position to help others through their recovery.
So was your diagnosis before or after or during
And my
your
fault was
homeless?
public too. It was all over the newspaper because where I was
Right.
at the time, I was doing some pretty nice things in the community, or at least I thought I was. But when you fall, you can fall hard and loud. So I fell very hard and
Wow.
very loud.
Your signal is breaking up a little bit, but I'm
I'm
hoping
sorry,
you can hear
I was
me.
speaking over you. I'm sorry.
No. I'm hoping you can hear me, even
Could you
with
repeat
the
the question?
signal the way it is, because this is good. This is really good because I think a lot of people in our community can resonate with you with
Is
what you're
anyone else having
saying.
difficulty hearing her?
No, we can hear her.
Yeah, I think you're on lag time. But
think she may have
Brother Ned
frozen.
and Brother and Jackie, is there anything that you want to kind of add on to this conversation?
Okay.
I think the process in which he went from is what's really
I
important,
do hear you.
that we need to really acknowledge in this, right? This is
Right.
what helps people really overcome the things that they are going through. It's hearing what's in between. It's not just the two end sandwiches. I started here and I ended here, but what's in between? What's the ingredients of the recipe that I believe that we should continue to have conversation on, and I think will be very useful to the listeners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that I think Brother Jerome alluded to it, and we talk about it in almost every segment, it's the pulling of the covers, right? Being transparent and comfortable enough to pull back the cover and say, here I am with all of my dysfunction, all of my issues, here's what's going on with me, so that you can now connect to, or possibly connect to, the right resources to help walk you through it. I think one of the worst things we do as a community and as individuals, particularly African Americans, is we try to pretend like we're okay when we know we're not. You know what I mean? We put this mask on for the folks who are around us to think that we got it all together and that our stuff don't stink. But the reality of it is that we're hurting, and we don't come forward and say, this hurts. You know what I mean? I lost a loved one and it hurts. my dad traumatized my childhood and it hurts. Like whatever's going on with us, we have to be willing and understand that we got to love ourselves enough to pull the covers back and say, here's what's going on with me. How do I get help? How do I fix this? How do I start the healing process? What's going on and why? And if we're not willing to ask ourselves those questions and talk ourselves through that process, we'll continue that ugly, vicious cycle that a lot of us see in our families, even in ourselves.
Jackie, you're not a quiet person, and this is your topic. So I'm gonna say this to you: it's time. It's time for you to take the cover off and do what Jackie does best, because you have it in you. It's time for you to release what you have for the people to hear.
One thing I'm going to say, Ned, and to Ned's point is, and I see this every day in work. Yes, there are people that don't know where to start. Yes, there are people who are in denial. But I see a population of people every day that are looking for help, and they don't get help until something tragic happens. They reach out for help, and they ask, for services. They ask for support in the community, and it's so hard to get help until you go ballistic on somebody. And then they say, oh, you traumatized everybody in the house. Nobody in the house is safe. And now they want to run in and lock you up and institutionalize you and not rehabilitate or help the recovery process. When in all actuality, you've been reaching out for help all the time, because some people do know. Some people do acknowledge, I've hit rock bottom and I need somebody to help me. And it's not until something drastic happens that help want to come. Now the Calvary want to come in and save the day, when in all actuality, if you'd have helped me on day one when I reached out, it wouldn't have been such a traumatic event in my household to where, kids taking knives and stabbing siblings. And I know parents that lock themselves in the room to get sleep at night. And this is sad, because that's traumatizing as a parent, to raise a child and you're living in fear for your life because of your own child that you birthed. And the sad thing about it is, protective services want to come in, when we handle it the way we handle it, but at the same time, I reached out for help, and I didn't qualify for this, and I didn't have the right insurance for that, and our community is hurting, and that's why why we suffer silence, because who wants to have to wait in line to get help? Who wants to have to sit on the phone 45 minutes to be told you called the wrong place, or to go somewhere to get help and they told you, hey, you don't qualify? So we continue to bear that burden in our homes and suffer in silence when we've reached out to, many different things. And I see this all the time. One of the things we try to tell people is saying the right words. You got to know what to say to push the right button to get help. And it shouldn't be that way. When you reach out for help, you're coming for help, and it should be like, hey, I need your help.
You should get help.
You qualify for this? Have you had this? And it's like, okay, you got to go through a whole checklist before you to tell me, no, I don't get it. And this agitates us and joins, puts more anxiety on us. And now we're dealing with, the anxiety, the stress, the overwhelm, along with the mental health challenges. And in our community, it just shouldn't be. We should have access to services and things that we need to help us to thrive, to help our children to thrive, to help our families to be safe and connected in the community. And the sad thing about it is, it's not that way. I don't know if you guys saw the video, but there's a video that's going viral that took place at Short Hills Mall in New Jersey recently. And it's sad that when we go out in public as people of color, we have to put a cell phone on to protect ourselves of what's happening to us. And it's sad, but that's the reality nowadays. You got a lot of Karens out there, and our daily life, our men, we did a session called Get Home Safely, what to do or what not to do when you stop by the police. It's sad that we have to do that in our community, but not in nobody else's. You got to defend your blackness. Where are you going? Why can't I go anywhere? I got a car I could drive to, and I got to tell you where I live and what I'm doing here. But that's what we endure on a daily basis. When they look at your license, registration, and insurance, what are you doing here? I could go anywhere my car could drive. Why do I have to have a reason? I may be just on a scenic route. But that's the reality, and that's traumatizing for us as people of color, to have to defend every day you step out your door, to have to defend yourself, to have to be on guard. It's sad, but it's a reality.
That's what I was looking for. So thank you, Jackie, for taking the cover off and being you. I'm going to say I resonate 1000% with what you said. And so my job here today is to take my hat off and to say, I'm going to come to you not just as host per se, but I'm part of the conversation and I'm going to give it to you from the caregiver perspective. I only have the success that I've seen, which I will say is very limited in nature, from outside organizations because of who I know and because I have an ability to speak the language, right? And oftentimes it doesn't, I want to say probably 99% of the time, it doesn't look like the way I see it. And that's an
Right.
issue. That's a huge problem that we have to learn as caregivers and parents, how to be able to have fancy, finesse, articulate conversations to be able to get the needs that we need met. But what I've seen is parents like me and mamas like me who go in and they fight and they say, no, I need this for my child. And then they're labeled the angry Black woman.
Yes.
And
Mhm.
so that becomes an issue too. And so that goes in with all of the other stuff that y'all said earlier. It sounds all good because we can put these things on it and we can call it these things, but when I see it, that don't matter. What I know is that I have a child who's being left behind. I have a loved one who's not getting the resources that they need, and while
Right.
everybody else is trying to finesse who going to be able to get what and be in whatever and trying to pretend like they have credentials that they don't, my child doesn't actually get the help that they need. And that's a really big issue here. I think that what I've been seeing across the board is not just that people won't come forward, but that there's an inability to be able to do exactly what Taraji said, is trust the process, right? We don't have trust anywhere. And the trust is because we haven't seen it work for others around us.
It doesn't
Right.
work in our favor.
And that's trauma.
There you go.
That's trauma in itself. I know when I get up to make a phone call because my daughter has gone through whatever she's going through and she's in one of her moments and I can't handle her. If I have a couple of choices. Lord, help me see this through. Do I need to call the police because it's getting too much? If I call the police, how am I going to handle? Because now I have to figure I got to handle the police in order to make sure that my child comes out of this situation alive,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Or
yes.
do I say, let me call an institution? But is it the right institution? When we get there, are they just going to try to medicate her to death till she fall asleep and not have to deal with her? Or are they really going to give her the things that she needs in order to be independent, in order to live independently? And I think a lot of those steps are missing. One of the things that, as we're all talking, and even as I'm talking about my own experience, when I think about moving past that mental stigma, talking about the things that we need to do, talking about why language is important, even all the way down when we talk about some of those counseling pieces and all that, I think a lot of this has to do with how can we educate ourselves from a different perspective, right? Education from in the format of, and I'm just thinking about it, right? Because we're in conversation, we're listening to one another. How do we deal with having classes on how we deal with social media? What mental health looks like in school systems, right? How do we get people connected to boards and places and organizations that directly impact our family, but that don't look like us, but look like us, right? Like how do we get these voices to the conversation without people feeling offended and toes being stepped on? That's the real part of the conversation that doesn't exist, right? Those are the things that really need to happen.
That's the sad part of it. I look at our community. They'll bring a clinical trial to our community and use us as
it exists in the corners,
monkeys, right? And
it
then,
exists, but it exists.
Then they would say, "Hey, in South Jersey or in the suburbs, we get this service," and I'm like, "Well, why we don't get it here?" But you want to bring the drug trials to our community. You will test the drugs for ADHD on our kids, but you won't give our kids access to things that they need to succeed to help them in life and help them get secondary education, post-secondary education. But the things that you do bring to our community benefits your pocket, and that's what I tell families. sometimes you have to equip yourself, and it takes you researching on your own because they're not going to tell you what's out there in our community, and that's one of the challenges we have here. You go to certain communities and they tell you, but then you come to Newark, nobody knows anything. But it's out there and it's available, and then you're looking like I just need help for my child. And then we had Dr. Cheryl Hardy, and I love her. She's a grief counselor. She came in and she was teaching our family on working with them on trauma, stress, because our families endure so much with mental health
Yeah,
challenges
they
and
do.
violence in the community. On top of that, a lot of them are displaced. A lot of them have substance use issues. And she was explaining to them that prolonged exposure to any stressful situation is traumatizing. So if you're in a situation where you can't get services for your kid, and your kid's been going through this for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, that's stressful. That's traumatizing because now you don't trust nobody because, hey, I'm reaching out for help and I have no help. Then you get to a system that's supposed to help you, and they taking you to a place, like you said, the first thing they want to do is medicate, but nobody asked me what's behind it. A lot of times
Right.
our kids are diagnosed with ADHD, and it's trauma. It's not ADHD, it's trauma. They live in communities, in homes. Our kids, kids raising kids because
Absolutely.
mom is a single mom and have to work. That's traumatizing because a child is not supposed to be parentified. But how do
Right.
we address this and make sure that what's available in certain parts of the state and certain parts of the county come to the urban core? We have to say something. You can't change what you won't confront. And us having this
That's right.
platform right here, exposing it, because some things only happen in our community, and we know that. You
Absolutely.
go to certain communities,
Yes.
there's no liquor stores on every corner in the suburban community, but you come to the black community, they got billboards as soon as you hit town, liquor
Yes.
stores on every corner, and then certain things they serve in our
Point.
community are not in other communities.
It's true. It's true.
Sure.
Brother Ned, yeah, well,
Yes.
I'm waiting for you to tell us from your perspective.
So, listen, I'm listening because I'm hearing exactly the same stuff that's happening here. I mean, like Jackie, I live in an urban setting. I live in the capital city here in Trenton, and she's absolutely right. We see stuff that happens in our communities that I don't witness in the suburban areas around my city. You know what I mean? There's struggles that we deal with here in the capital city that other folks don't even get a chance to get a taste of. You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
but then we're expected to fall into a line or to a box or fit into a mold that doesn't equate in our neighborhoods and our communities. So you can't say to me, well, you're going to send me a grief counselor from a suburban area into an urban city and expect my kids to say, okay,
Right.
let me expose or open up to you. There, you can't do that. And they try that to us, and they push that or thrust that down our throats on a regular basis because they're not sensitive to what's going on with the trauma in our neighborhoods and in our communities. And it's sad, as it's been stated, it's a sad affair when we have to deal with the struggles of life in our neighborhoods and our communities and our homes, and then have folks who live outside of our communities try to dictate to us, the steps to healing or the steps to recovery, when they really don't even have a clear understanding of how we got to where we are, or they don't care how we got to where
Yes.
we are.
That's
There you
good.
go, Ned. They don't care. Because you know what? With all this violence in our community, there's some federal
They
dollars that
don't.
belong. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to put it out there.
Absolutely.
They allow some of this
All
to
over.
happen in the community so they can collect that
Oh,
funding.
thank
That
you.
funding doesn't trickle down to services or support
Yes.
or protection. So we live in this
Right.
tense, anxious state constantly, and that's trauma. Because it's
Mhm.
to live in a prolonged state of anxiety is traumatizing. Stress is traumatizing. Families
Absolutely.
overwhelmed. Kids can't go outside and play because my nephew told me one time we were sitting in the house and he was about 8, 9 years old and summertime. And I thought it was fireworks. He said, "No, Auntie, that's gunshots." How is a 9-year-old kid supposed to be able to identify the difference between fireworks and gunshots?
Yeah.
Identified with a gunshot.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So what are the prolonged, and welcome back, Brother Jerome. What are the prolonged effects of, always continuously encountering trauma? And I think, Brother Jerome, I want to make sure, is your internet back on? Are you able to speak your piece?
Uh-oh. You
We
there, Brother
can't.
Jerome?
Brother Jerome,
We can't hear you, brother. We want to hear the word from you.
Yes.
You got good things to say. We need to hear you.
I'm going to interject while he gets his internet
Yes, go
together.
ahead while
But
he's
I used
getting it
to laugh
together.
when I
I
was
think so.
younger.
I checked my signal. It said it was strong, so I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me?
Oh, there he is.
Okay,
There
we
you go.
hear you right
Yes.
now. Go ahead. Finish saying what you're saying while we got you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
I'm here.
He's on
I
a
hear,
lag.
I hear all of you just fine, and I can see you just fine. And
We see you, Justice. If you want to be a part of the conversation, you know you're more than welcome to be a part of the conversation one day. I know that you have a lot of great things from your own story that you can give to the people, especially from the perspective of mental health, incarceration, being able to come back and rebuild yourself. I'm proud of you and essentially
I was
what you're
checking
doing
my signal
today.
again. It says strong on my end. I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. We can hear
I
you.
want to answer your
Go ahead.
question, Malika. When you said, what are some of the symptoms of prolonged exposure to trauma, right?
Right.
When we were younger, I never understood this, but my nana used to say, "Oh, my nerves, my nerves, my nerves," right? Not knowing
Yes.
that was a reaction to trauma. And
Yes,
I'm
ma'am.
like, what are your nerves? What's
Yes.
your nerves? It was always, oh, my nerves, and they get anxious, you know. But that's when how our bodies respond to being in that situation or that state for a period of time, and we've become numb to it because it was the norm. When Nana said, "Oh, my nerves," we said, "Get a pill," but we didn't know what that pill was. As I got
Mm,
older and got into mental health, you know,
that's good.
now I know what the pill was. You know, I know what the
Now,
oh my nerves was. But that was normal in our community. Our bodies, anything you hold in, your body responds. Your body, whether it's headache, sleepless nights, weight gain, weight loss, and we're so in tune with ourselves that we look at it like, okay, that's normal. It's not normal. It's
No.
not. It's just our body responding to what we've held in for so long. And we're now at the place where, you know, this generation is like, hey, take the covers off. Let's deal with this because we can't live like this forever. We can't go on
Right.
like this.
I'm going to add to that from another perspective. So not just the manifestation of ailments in the body, but Brother Jerome can attest to this one, that prolonged trauma also leads to bipolar disorder, right? That it can cause people to have schizophrenic episodes, right?
Mhm.
And so this is why it's so important for us to have these conversations, why it's so important for our listeners to participate, because we want to hear your stories. We need to know. So it's okay for us to be in here listening to one another and for you to listen to us. But what's more important is the fact that we need to hear your testimony, and don't be ashamed. Don't be scared to share. Let us know what you have experienced. Your experience matters. It matters for the sake of who we are, and it also matters for the sake of who's coming behind us. We need to know how to be able to nip this in the bud, right? And say, hey, you know what? I don't want to send the next generation into the same traumatic place. I don't want to give my issues off to my kids, right? Is what I'm going to just say it just like that. And so I'm in the business of breaking generational curses. I'm in the business of really making sure that I'm doing what I need to do as mama, as caregiver, as a socially responsible individual for my community and my family, to say, I'm going to walk with you. And I think that's a big part of the process of healing, right? I had this conversation with my mother and my pastor the other day about what it really looks like to walk with someone. So it's all cute for us to create all of this programming and all these things that we want to call all these cute names, right? It looks good, but what does it mean to walk with someone when they're dealing with their issues, when they got all of the stuff that they're carrying and the weights from the day to day? What does it mean to say, while he crying and he breaking down, to pick up the phone and say, this is what you need to do? And then not just say, this is what you need to do, but here, I call so and so for you. Let's connect. Then to follow up and say, did you connect with Mr. So and so? And then how you doing? And it's going to be all right. And to give assurance and reassurance through the process until they see themselves as themselves. I think, like you said, Brother Ned, there's so much masks going on. There's so that imposter syndrome is so prevalent today. And in order for us to be able to move past that, we got to be able to connect and walk with people. So I'm a pass this over to y'all.
The imposter syndrome. But you know what? Yeah. A lot of this comes from the expectation of us. You know, we're not expected to break. We're not expected to be weak. We're not expected to. But I say all the time, you can have your moment. You need to have your moment. Have your moment, and then after you have your moment, connect to community, because those are the people that are going to be there. And I tell people all the time, you can't do this alone. You can't recover alone. That's why peer support is valuable in recovery. When you have that peer, somebody that understands that journey before, they're with you, walking with you, not just telling you, okay, call me back, because crisis and trauma is not 9 to 5. Right. Okay, it's 24/7. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Amen. Say that again.
You need that person in the midnight hours. I know it's you can't predict it, but sometimes, you know, you could be holding it together. I remember one day I was sitting at work and I just broke down and started crying. I couldn't explain why, you know, and everybody looking at me like, you're supposed to be strong. And I'm like, what is strong? What is strong?
That's good.
You know, but that's the expectation of it. Yes.
And who defines it?
Yes, that's the key. But you got to know when. Some things you can handle and you go through a process, but you got to know when to bring people in to support you, when those moments of weakness, and when you need that support, when you need somebody to come in and say, I'm here with you. Not here for you, I'm here with you.
Yeah.
There's a big difference.
That's important, right? Because I think a lot of people don't recognize that anything can be a trigger, right? And then not only can anything be a trigger, that any one of us can have a mental breakdown at any given moment. I think about Kanye when I say that. I think about myself. I think about a lot of these people. I think about Whitney Houston. I think about even Bobby Brown. I think about Mariah Carey. Like, there's tons of people that are in the spotlight that we have seen have these mental breaks. Instead of dealing with the what's really around it. Yeah, Brother Jerome, go ahead. And I'm going to continue that. So instead of really dealing with what's really around it, we oftentimes judge it. And we judge it because we don't know. We don't even recognize at times that we've developed habits mentally that we don't always recognize that the rationality we have behind those habits are really from traumatic experiences and traumatic things that have happened to us. And there's so much to this conversation that we could talk about concerning the effects of trauma and all of the things that are encompassed in it and how it hits our people. But I don't know if I want each of you to wrap this up and give us a statement or two about your thoughts and why, what are some of the things that our communities and our faith leaders and our families can do to help their loved ones really speak about the trauma that has happened to them, and then give some ways in which we can learn to listen, because listening is not just a word where it is an action, a behavior. It is a poise, right? It's something we do. So how do we learn how to teach people to do active listening? And we're going to end it there. And I thank all of y'all for y'all time, but go ahead. We're wanting to hear from y'all about how we can begin this process of truth telling and active listening.
I started an initiative here. I put together a group of people, Black clinicians, faith-based community partners. And we're looking at creating a safe Black space. Mm-hmm. Safe Black space is an initiative that started a while ago where They were looking at churches opening up to the community to give people a place to come and just talk. That's the first place. Give them a place to talk, non-judgmentally, and to be there to support them, because a lot of times people suffer in silence because they don't feel they have someone that they could talk to that will listen. Because a lot of people are not listening; they're waiting to speak. So we've created a coalition, and anybody that wants to be involved, Hit Royalty Mission Network. We're creating safe Black spaces for people to come and talk, because that's the first thing. Opening up, being able to open up honestly to people that can help you, guide you.
Oh, can you hear me?
And that's one of the things we're looking
Still
at
can't hear me.
here in our community.
No, we can hear
creating.
you, Brother Jerome.
I don't know why.
We can't.
We can't hear you.
We can hear
You're
you.
having a lag time. I don't know if you log in from your phone, it might be better or easier.
Yes. So creating that space for them to have an outlet to talk, to know that they're not alone. There's somebody out there to support them and to be with them and connect them to what they need. And just that listening ear that's non-judgmental is key. And that's what we're looking at creating to help deal with the challenges of trauma in this community.
I'm gonna stop us really quickly because we have a comment. I think that this is an important comment. I agree with everything that's being said. However, I have to say that when our Black people who believe everyone has a choice of how their future turns out are not understanding that every Black community across the country is not identical, because we are all stupid. The system was built, and we need to be honest about those closed doors meetings for decades of how to keep us in the crab in the bucket start a kind of mentality. And he said it's literally a state of mentality. So I understand. I think you just spoke truth, right? That's why we having these conversations, right? We have
Systems
these
are made to keep you dependent on systems. And I say that all the time. Systems are made to keep you dependent on systems. It's not made for recovery. It's not made for healing. And if you look at how systems are set up, you transition from one system to the next. You know, look at the pipeline to prison. Yes, the pipeline to prison starts with special education system. And a lot of our kids are the ones labeled and end up on the other end of that pipeline, right? So I totally agree.
Absolutely.
It's not made for recovery or rehabilitation. Prison system. It's not made for rehabilitation. It's made to bring you right back so they can make $1 off of you. I totally agree.
I'm going to put a charge out there, though. The charge becomes, that's why we need people like you to be a part of the conversation, because you're not stupid. You do get it. And what makes us stupid in the process is the fact that we get it and then we don't do anything about it. So the challenge then becomes to you, Mr. Galloway, how are you going to now begin to bring yourself into the conversations and into the spaces, whether they give it to you or not? Because no one has to give you anything.
Correct.
You can forge your way into the community and become the pillar of the community yourself, become the voice. But I will add this, it comes with a price. There's a cost to this thing, right? And just like Martin Luther King, I'm going to say this, he struggled with great depression, a lot of mental health issues. There's pressure that comes with being the representation and trying to forge our way through and break through a lot of the chains that come along with systematic racism and all of the stuff that has been built up over time. But you can do it, and you do have support. There's a following. Brother Jerome, we're glad to have you back on. You look much clearer, so I'm sure you can hear us much better.
I was under the impression that my laptop would be better than my phone, but it wasn't. So I'm back on my phone.
Yes. Love it.
We need to keep this trauma conversation going just so Jerome can chime in.
The one thing that I am so happy about is that we will continue to do this.
Yes.
Because there's some things that I just want to throw out there as we start to wrap up.
Come on.
We need to understand that the whole recovery process, you described my job earlier, but the whole recovery process, it's a very long and tangled process. We talked about early intervention. There are early intervention services available. They're there 24 hours a day, and it's not just crisis. And then we've talked about access in the community. There is a certified certified community behavioral health centers that got funded about 5 years ago, and each city has one or two providers in that area. Now that's where I had my caseload of all men, most of whom looked just like me, in Trenton. But we need to know where to enter the system, and then it's very difficult to navigate it. So you do need peers. I've navigated this system. It was difficult, but it did help. Was it all culturally competent? Absolutely not. But I'd rather have a little bit of help than no help. And I was able to get help. But you're right. I did understand the language. I was willing to put in the time. It should be easier for our community, but it's not. But we don't even seem to know where to begin. And it doesn't begin with 911. That's probably not the place to begin.
Not at all.
Not at all.
We need
That's the worst place.
Early intervention.
And that's sad because they're liaisons for the community. They're supposed to be.
They're supposed to be.
And so this is where we need to have the real conversation. What do we need to do to get them to understand it? Is it really being able to go in and create these community places where we say, hey, the police need to come and meet with the community? Do we create this intermediary resource center? People come up with all of these real ideas, right? But we still have not met the need of the fact that no one's having the conversation about the why, right? What's happening in between? What do we need to do in order to prevent even getting to that space, right? But I'll leave that alone for another time. Brother Jerome, you wanted to finish up and say what you're saying?
I can't wait to come back and have more conversation, because I'm also the graduate of the Morris County, New Jersey Police Academy. So,
okay.
I know this I've seen this from both sides. They'd be able to begin to understand this. There really is enough. We don't necessarily understand in our own community. And unfortunately, in cities like Trenton, the police officers aren't even from our community. So that there's all sorts of complexities here that I'm going to throw this out there. How do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. And that's where we are.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I appreciate
Jerome,
that.
you said something that's key. One of my kids in my youth program said to me, he said, Miss Jackie, to be a doctor, you have to go to school for how many years? To be a teacher, you have to go to school for how many years? They go to police academy, you put a gun in their hand with no education on mental
for about
health.
6 months.
Yes, no education on mental health and how to handle or how to, de-escalate. And then you put a gun in their hand, and when they get a call, the first thing they do is come guns blazing. That should be a requirement for law enforcement. Not just 6 months in the academy, you put them on the street. No, they need to take some classes, because a lot of the people they encounter are having those traumatic experiences, and how they deal with them could be a matter of life or death.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Hey, Brother Ned, is there one thing that you want to give to the people before we end our call today?
Well, I think Jackie said it earlier, and I'm just going to regurgitate that statement, that I think that it's important for folks to learn to listen to understand, not listen to respond. You know what I mean? That's crucial for us as we start learning to help each other in this process. Trusting the process is important, but listening to each other in the process is what's going to help us get from point A to point B better.
And hopefully we'll get to talk about the things we need to be listening for, because we do send out codes. There are red flags. There are definitely red flags.
Yes, sir.
What's not being said, right? Jerome, was not being said is what we're listening
what's not
for.
being said.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes.
And why did they say it that way? Because people are telling you what's going on with them.
That's right.
But you have to begin to develop an ear to listen for that type of stuff.
So true.
Well, I really appreciate y'all. We can continue this conversation for hours, especially because it's something that is close and near and dear to our hearts. But I want to thank each and every one of you for having the courage to come on this platform and speak your own truths, and then be able to be a witness to what it is that we need to do as a community of people together to kind of move our communities forward. And so I want to just say thank you for that. For the rest of our listeners, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to even just want to listen. Even if you didn't participate and you took the time out to just listen, that means that you are being a part of the process. You're trying to figure it out.
Thank you.
And as long as you're trying
Thank
to
you.
figure it out, that means you're headed in the right direction. You can continue to join in with us every Wednesday at 5 p.m. So we'll be continuing to do this for the next 6 weeks now. You can continue to listen in at 5 p.m. live. If you want to be able to send in questions ahead of time, if you aren't able to make the live at 5, but you have some questions, you have a statement that you want to give, please feel free to drop it in the message center or drop it below in this news feed. We'll be able to go back and see it, and we will address it going forward. As well, I want to just say that I'm hopeful that we'll be able to begin the process of being able to have each and every one of individuals in our communities begin to tell the truth, right? Their truth. And then that each and every one of us will begin to learn how to do that active listening process. Thank you for joining us in the throne room, where we are addressing the Healing Challenge Mental Health Edition. I can't wait to see you all next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Talk to you guys later, guys. Bye-bye.
Be safe.
Take care, guys.
Bye.